I floated through the docking bay, my boots clanging against the metallic surface in a rhythm that felt embarrassingly loud. The Alien Queen's flagship was enormous, a prism of black and silver panels that reflected distant stars like shards of broken glass. I had been briefed on etiquette, warned about her reputation, and reminded repeatedly that compliments were a dangerous weapon if misused. I wasn't entirely sure which part of me they wanted preserved, my life, my dignity, or my career, but I reminded myself that humans often survived this sort of thing by either charm or sheer luck. I had neither really, but I had brought my best attempt at charm, which in human terms amounted to a nervous smile and the occasional awkward bow. The entryway shimmered, a translucent field that adjusted itself to the shape of whoever passed through. It tickled the edges of my senses, making my hair stand on end and my stomach flip. I reminded myself that it was supposed to be a security measure, not an invitation to panic. A robotic attendant, shaped vaguely like a giraffe but with 6 tiny appendages, scuttled alongside me, chittering like an overcaffeinated parrot. "Don't trip," I muttered to it, though I doubted it could understand me. It emitted a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sneeze and led me forward. The corridor was long and tubular, glowing faintly in soft blue tones, and filled with the faint hum of energy flowing through the walls. I tried to imagine what it would be like to live here, surrounded by technology that could probably terraform a planet if it sneezed the wrong way. I kept my eyes forward, careful not to stare at the projections hovering in the air, showing battles I barely understood and maps of galaxies I couldn't pronounce. Somewhere deep in my mind, I noted that the chance of accidentally insulting a star system I didn't know existed was worryingly high. Then I saw her. She didn't walk into the corridor. She seemed to glide, a creature both alien and astonishingly human in form, with long ears arching elegantly from her head and eyes that seemed to catalog everything about me in a fraction of a second. I almost tripped over my own feet. Her presence filled the space like gravity itself, and I felt the kind of nervous flutter in my chest usually reserved for moments right before accidentally launching a shuttle into a sun. I opened my mouth ready to speak, and it felt like gravity had decided to hold my jaw in place. "Welcome," she said, her voice smooth but quiet, carrying a melodic lilt that made me feel like a fool for thinking humans had a monopoly on charm. She didn't smile, at least not fully, but the corners of her mouth twitched in a way that suggested amusement. I tried to bow, but my knees argued with me. Somewhere behind her, the corridor shifted, holograms reacting to her presence like obedient shadows. "Thank you, Your Majesty," I said, feeling every syllable tremble like an overcooked string of binary code. "It's UHAN honor." Her eyes studied me. I swear I saw the faintest flicker of curiosity, something that made my heart skip in ways that were entirely unreasonable. "You are human," she said, stating what I already knew, which seemed oddly both reassuring and terrifying. "Your kind often says things meant to please." "Yes," I replied cautiously, "but I swear I only say things meant to avoid sudden death." I grimaced at my own words. She raised a delicate eyebrow, long ears twitching slightly, and I thought I caught a hint of a smile, though it could have been a trick of the lighting. "You are clumsy," she said softly, not as a rebuke, more like a statement of fact. "And nervous, that is endearing." I blinked. "Endearing? That is thank you." I realized halfway through speaking that it sounded entirely less impressive than I had intended. Her ears flicked again, and this time the gesture was undeniably human in its subtle shyness, though her form was anything but. "I am not used to honesty that is not layered," she admitted. There was a pause, and then she added, almost in passing, "You may walk beside me." Her words were casual, but in the context of a ruler who could obliterate entire fleets with a gesture, they might as well have been an invitation to dine in orbit with a star. I followed her through the corridors, trying not to stumble over my own feet, the robotic attendant waddling behind like a judge ready to record every error. We passed chambers that hummed with energy fields and rooms that floated above the deck as if gravity had forgotten them entirely. Every corner had a hint of alien sophistication, with tools and objects that seemed both functional and decorative in ways that made me wish I had a manual for just existing in this ship. "I have read about humans," she said suddenly, her long ears twitching in rhythm with her words. "You value courage, humor, curiosity." I swallowed. Well, curiosity is easy, courage sometimes negotiable, humor mostly accidental. I gestured at the floating holographic panels displaying stellar phenomena. "Like that one, look at it, it's like the universe is juggling suns, right?" She glanced at the holograms, and I swear I saw the tiniest smirk play across her face. "You amuse yourself easily." "I try," I said, hoping my voice didn't reveal how much I was terrified of offending her. "Accidentally is my specialty." We continued walking, exchanging small observations, my attempts at humor punctuating the quiet tension with clumsy timing. She commented on human architecture, I joked about alien etiquette, and somewhere in the midst of all this, the awkwardness transformed into something subtler, a bridge forming not out of diplomacy or flattery, but of shared acknowledgement that we were both navigating an absurdly complex galaxy in our own ways. Finally, we arrived at a chamber that seemed more private, bathed in soft violet light and lined with flowing metallic surfaces that reacted to our presence. I cleared my throat, trying to find words that wouldn't make me look foolish. Your ears, they are remarkable, I mean beautiful. The pause that followed was long enough for me to fear I had misjudged the moment entirely. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed, a sound soft, almost like wind through a crystal forest, and her ears twitched in a way that seemed unconsciously shy. You are honest, she said, a trace of something I had not anticipated in her voice. And strangely genuine, that is refreshing. I grinned awkwardly, thinking perhaps the galaxy's most feared ruler had just complimented me back. Genuine accidentally, I said, and she chuckled again, the sound warming the room more than any lighting could. In that moment, the weight of titles, empires, and political expectations seemed to dissolve slightly, leaving only two beings, one human, one alien, both fumbling and curious, discovering that sincerity and humor could sneak past even the most formidable defenses. And for the first time, I felt that perhaps this encounter, however improbable, was the beginning of something neither of us had fully expected. I followed her down the corridor, trying desperately not to imagine every conceivable way I could trip over a floating panel and embarrass myself in front of the galaxy's most intimidating ruler. The ship hummed with life, and not the kind that could be described as human. Pipes of glowing energy ran along walls and ceilings, pulsating in rhythm with some hidden heartbeat, and small orbs floated by like curious pets, chirping electronically at anything that moved. I gave them a half-hearted wave, which I assumed was polite, though one orb zoomed toward my head, made a high-pitched squeak, and zipped away. I muttered something about needing a manual for everything, and the queen, gliding beside me, didn't comment, though her ears twitched slightly, which I took as a sign of mild amusement. Her quarters were unlike anything I had imagined, an elegant chaos of technology and nature. Gravity fields shifted subtly, letting plants float in arcs and curves, petals suspended midair like stars captured for decoration. I reached out to steady myself against a railing that wasn't really a railing but something that worked just like one, and I realized that if I didn't adapt quickly, I might get launched into a wall by a misplaced magnetic pulse. She observed me quietly, long ears flicking as if she could hear my internal panic as clearly as my voice. You are clumsy in an amusing way, she said, almost conversationally. Have you always been this human? What? IUH tried to keep it consistent, I replied, earning a soft chuckle from her. I realized then that laughter from a queen was dangerous. It was mesmerizing in a way that made me lose focus entirely. Consistency in my kind is usually considered a survival trait, or, a way to not make everyone stare at you like you've just invented a new way to ruin tea time. What? She tilted her head, the gesture human enough to be endearing, alien enough to be disarming. You find humor in the simplest failures. I think that's just called surviving, I said, with style or style-adjacent tripping. I took a careful step over a floating orb, feeling absurdly proud that I had not launched myself into the ceiling. The queen's eyes followed my movement, calculating something I couldn't possibly guess, and I wondered if she was trying to determine whether I was brave, foolish, or both. A small drone hovered near her shoulder, buzzing like an over-enthusiastic fly. It's named Fizz, she explained. It repeats your mistakes as a form of entertainment. I raised an eyebrow. You mean it's mocking me? What? Perhaps, she said, ears twitching slightly, or perhaps it is teaching you humility. I laughed nervously. If humility is learning not to get flung across the room by a robotic potted plant, then yes, I am very humble. She smiled faintly, a curve of lips that softened the intensity I had felt earlier in the docking bay. Somehow, the impossible majesty of her form became approachable, her shyness peeking through her sovereign armor. We moved through the chambers, passing holographic projections of galaxies and ships, displays of interstellar weather patterns, and some sort of tactical simulation that flickered as though impatient with our conversation. You seem interested in the universe, she said. I am, I admitted. Curiosity is dangerous, though, usually ends with someone asking for a written apology in triplicate or my accidental launch into a nebula. What? Her laughter followed, light and melodic, and I realized it was easier to breathe around her than I had expected. You make mistakes often, she said, still smiling, yet you are endearing because of it. Endearing again? I asked, feeling my face heat. I think my species has only one word for that, probably awkwardly doomed. You are more than words can capture, she said, her voice softening as we passed into a chamber filled with floating spheres that contained miniature storms. Lightning crackled harmlessly inside them, illuminating the room with every arc. I moved closer, unable to resist, and she raised an eyebrow, ears twitching like she was trying not to laugh. Do you ever get lonely? I asked. The question slipped out before I could analyze whether it was inappropriate. Her posture stiffened slightly, though her tone remained calm. Lonely, she repeated it as though tasting the word, in the ways that matter sometimes. Her ears twitched, a subtle gesture that made me think she was about to retract the admission, but she didn't. Rulership isolates one in ways that the galaxy does not see. What? I nodded, trying not to look like I was attempting to guess her emotions. Humans have the same problem, except we try to hide it behind sarcasm, accidental comedy, and terrible coffee. What? She glanced at me, one corner of her lips twitching. Terrible coffee. Yes, I said, it's mostly a ritual to survive mornings without existential panic. Her laughter, soft and unexpected, echoed in the chamber, and I realized it was a sound that could unbalance me more effectively than any gravity shift. You are amusing, she said, and human. I try to be, I admitted, stepping carefully to avoid a floating garden that might knock me off balance. Sometimes I succeed. Mostly I just keep my hands and feet attached and hope for the best. The Queen watched me, her eyes narrowing in concentration. You are not trying to impress me with power or status, she observed. You are yourself, that is rare. What? I chuckled awkwardly. Rare is my specialty, mostly because I trip on it regularly. She snorted softly, ears twitching in amusement, and for a moment, all the tension of diplomacy and interstellar stakes melted. I realized I could speak freely, joke freely, and she would respond not as a ruler, but as a being who might just understand the ridiculousness of existing in a galaxy that demanded perfection. Your ears, they move, I said suddenly, pointing with a trembling hand. It's fascinating, like a tiny antennas for emotion. She glanced at me, a faint blush creeping across her cheeks. Perhaps, she said, ears twitching in a shy acknowledgement, they reveal what I do not always say. That's incredible, I said. I mean, humans can hide everything behind poker faces or terrible excuses, but you, I gestured vaguely, trying to convey the combination of awe and humor I felt. You're not just formidable. You're alive in ways we don't get to see. Her gaze softened and she gave me a nod that felt like permission to continue. You speak with honesty. I asked. Mostly I just avoid dying in awkward ways. What? Her laugh echoed softly, like wind through crystal towers, and I realized that even the most feared queen of the galaxy could be delighted by something as human as fumbling sincerity. You are unexpected, she said. And you're unexpectedly approachable, I replied. She tilted her head, ears twitching, and for a fleeting moment it felt as though our species, so different yet strangely similar, were finding a rhythm that transcended titles, protocol, and even planets. The rest of the chamber fell into a gentle quiet, filled only with floating light, whispering energy fields, and our shared, clumsy companionship. I realized then that what had begun as formal politeness and awkward compliments was transforming into something subtler, a bridge of humor, curiosity, and mutual acknowledgement that neither of us had anticipated, yet both were eager to explore. And somewhere in the quiet flickers of violet light, I understood that this connection, fragile, improbable, and profoundly human, was only just beginning. The alarm blared just as I was attempting, with little success, to untangle myself from a zero-gravity chair that had decided to float me toward the ceiling. The alien queen appeared in the doorway, long ears twitching in a way that suggested equal parts irritation and amusement. The insurgents have breached the outer defense grid, she said calmly, her voice betraying nothing of panic, though the hum of the ship around us pulsed faster, almost like it knew the danger before we did. I clutched the armrests of the chair, finally managing to settle on the floor. Outer grid, inner grid, which one do I punch first? I asked, trying to mask panic with humor. She raised a slender eyebrow, ears flicking. Not punch. Coordinate, strategize. I expect minimal destruction of the interior. Right, I said, trying to imagine how someone could strategize without accidentally converting the bridge into an impromptu fireworks display. Minimal destruction, noted, attempting heroics level low. She gestured and a holographic display bloomed in front of us, showing ships weaving through asteroid fields with aggressive precision. I studied the patterns, realizing that if my life depended on physics and human improvisation, I might actually have a fighting chance. She guided my hand, and though I made mistakes pressing the wrong interface, sending a squad of drones on a loop through the wrong sector, she corrected me gently, a faint humor in her voice. You are reckless in ways that are amusing, she said. I quipped back, I prefer the term creatively unpredictable. She smiled, ears twitching, and for a moment I forgot the chaos outside. There was a strange intimacy in the calm of strategy, two beings navigating danger with humor and trust rather than fear. The insurgents made a sudden push toward the starboard hangar, forcing the Queen and me to take action in real time. I accidentally hit a console that sent a mini-drone squad careening through the air, buzzing like caffeinated bees. "Fizz no," I shouted. The Queen laughed, a short sound that cut through the tension and reminded me why I had begun this journey in awe of her. "They are not your pets," she said, though the laughter lingered. By improvising, joking, and occasionally panicking, we managed to redirect the fleet, intercepting the insurgent ships with minimal collateral damage. At one point, I had to leap across a shifting gravity field, barely catching a floating railing with my hand, and she reached out, not because I needed saving, but because her touch was a steadying anchor in the chaos. I couldn't help but think, if surviving this is anything like surviving her, I was both terrified and oddly exhilarated. Once the battle subsided and the outer grid stabilized, we floated in the aftermath, surrounded by quiet hums of repaired systems and floating petals from the gardens we had brushed past. She turned toward me, long ears tilting slightly and almost human shyness threading through her commanding presence. "You performed well," she said, not as a sovereign delivering judgment, but as someone who had glimpsed my courage and sincerity. I shrugged, still catching my breath. "Mostly luck," I said, "and maybe a little terrifying hope." She raised an eyebrow. "Terrifying hope?" "Yes," I said, gesturing vaguely at the stars beyond the viewport, "the kind that makes you do things you never thought you could, even when you have every reason to fail spectacularly." "What?" She studied me, and I saw something shift in her eyes, a combination of admiration, amusement, and a rare vulnerability. "I am not used to anyone seeing me like this," she admitted. Her ears twitched, a subtle gesture of shyness I had come to recognize as genuine. Not the Queen, not the ruler, not the legend, just me. I grinned, awkward as ever. "Well, I'm good at seeing impossible things. Humans call it a talent for noticing disaster before it happens. Also, we notice beauty and bravery, sometimes in the same breath." Her laughter, soft and melodic, filled the chamber. "You are unexpected," she said, as though the word alone could not capture the mix of wonder and absurdity I had introduced into her life. In the quiet that followed, I realized how much I had changed. I had arrived here as an observer, nervous and deferential, fumbling through a galaxy of unknown protocols. Now, I felt a confidence born not of skill or authority, but of connection. Humor and sincerity had opened doors that fear and formality could not. I had learned to move with uncertainty without losing myself, to speak truthfully even when the stakes were cosmic. She reached out, her hand brushing mine in a gesture both commanding and tender. "You have changed this ship," she said, almost thoughtfully. "Not its mechanics nor its defenses, but its spirit." "What?" "And you," I said, feeling my own chest tighten with an emotion I had never anticipated, "have changed what I thought was possible. I expected fear, protocol, maybe politics. I didn't expect this." I gestured between us at the bridge, the floating gardens, the quiet hum of a ship that felt alive not because of technology, but because of shared moments like this. Her ears twitched and she laughed softly. "This is the galaxy, then. Dangerous, unpredictable, and strangely human." "Yes," I said, leaning back slightly as the gravity fields shifted to give us a gentle sway. "Strangely human, with a touch of alien genius thrown in for good measure." What? We floated together in the calm aftermath, laughter easing the tension of the battle and the weight of our respective worlds. I realized that endings were rarely perfect, yet somehow this one, full of humor, trust, and an improbable connection, felt complete. She had allowed herself to be seen, and I had discovered courage and sincerity in the face of an alien majesty that had once seemed untouchable. Finally, she broke the silence, ears flicking in a gesture I had learned meant she was pleased. "You are not what I expected," she said. "Neither are you," I replied, grinning. The stars outside shimmered in quiet applause as we floated there, two beings from opposite ends of the universe, discovering that connection, humor, and honesty could transcend protocol, power, and even the vast stretches of space. And for the first time, I knew that this improbable journey, awkward, terrifying, hilarious, had changed both of us. I had arrived fearing the unknown, but I left understanding that sometimes the greatest discoveries were not planets, nor fleets, nor ancient technology, but a hand extended, a smile shared, and the courage to be human in the presence of the extraordinary.